Right, let's see. Right, so I'm just gonna wait for this to go live. Well, let's clear up some of this whilst. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Let's see, folks, how it's going. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Bienvenidos marratan ukhra. Right. God. Let's see. Have you watched Muslims Like Us? Lol. Is that? No, I haven't watched Muslims Like Us. Right, so let's get started. Can somebody just give me a shout out whether the voice, you can hear the volume fine? Is that okay? When is my birthday? My birthday is in January, people. Right, so is it haram to take sleeping pills? Right, plain. Right, is the volume okay? Can you hear me fine? Yep, I take it you can. Assalamu alaikum. Amira, shukran, Vaisal. Okay. Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih al-Mustafa wa ala ibadihi alladhina irtada wa man bihudahum ihtada wa bi athari ahli al-Madinati iqtafa wa ba'd fa salamu Allahi alaykum wa rahmatuhu ta'ala wa barakatuh. Right, so we've got a lot of amazing questions coming right through. Okay, so shukran, Salman, Qadir, I appreciate it just as much. Some angry faces already. Love to see you all. Love to see I'm still doing my magic, weaving my magic on some people on Facebook with this question, praying Isha before midnight. Okay, let's take that question. Praying Isha before midnight. I'm not sure what that fully means. The thing is, if you mean by that, because Isha obviously is before midnight, Isha is with the horizon disappearing, and the time for Salah in general, as Imam Malik says in his Muwatta, and I do understand there are varying narrations, so if you look at I know some of the students transmit different things, but the Muwatta, which is his book of hadith, which he himself authored, he says in it, وَقْتُ Salah مَا لَمْ تَدْخُلِ الْأُخْرَى, that a Salah remains as long as the Salah has not come in. And he's speaking about things like Maghrib goes on till Isha, and Isha goes on till dawn, till Subah. The only exception and the break in the chain is Fajr. Sorry, I'm saying it Fajr because that's what most people refer to it as. The school of Medina call it a Subah. But the morning prayer, the dawn prayer, Subah or Fajr, whatever you call it, once it's sunrise, that ends, and so that doesn't technically go into another Salah because it has such a clear demarcating point, which is sunrise. Okay, so I hope that clarifies that question. It's not it's nothing controversial really, and that can you pray before a particular time. Of course, midnight, it kicks in way before midnight. You can pray after midnight as well. Right, offering Salah. Please share the proofs of offering Salah with open hands. Okay, that's a good question. This is referred to as sadl. Okay, sadl. The Hanafiya tend to refer to it as irsal, which is a kind of hanging, and the Malikiya, or the school of Medina, refer to it as sadl, which is also to allow something to hang. Sadala, if something just sadala is for something to hang. Quite often used with the kind of cloak, if you like. It kind of does sadl. Anyway, so coming to this point, in prayer, where do we place the hands within Salah? Now, you have to understand, it is interesting that many people don't think about this. None of the schools of law or thought or madhhab or whatever you want to call them refer to the placing of the hands as an emphasized sunnah. None of them. So none of them believe this was such an important sunnah that the Prophet always, he advocated strongly that you do. Nobody. Right? So that's the first interesting point. None of the schools of law say that by forgetting to place your hands or by not placing your hands in the appropriate position, whatever that may be, should you do sujood al-sahl, a sajda to repair the salah, to salvage the salah. No school of law says that. Thirdly, this is another really intriguing point, right? There isn't a single sahih, sarih, undisputed hadith on where to place the hands in salah. Now, some of you are probably thinking, what on earth is he talking about? Because there are plenty of ahadith. You'll be surprised. There are plenty of ahadith, but none of them are problem-free. So, I'm just going to actually just check that I've got this on. Yeah, I've got this. Right. Right, so none of these are problem-free. So every single, and the most authentic narration that people present is the one Imam Malik himself presents in the Muwatta, and Imam Bukhari presents it as well. So the point is that, so let's say this hadith where the companion is saying kunna nu'mar, that we would be commanded to place our hand one above the other in salah, but he doesn't say who commanded him. Now the assumption here is, no, not the assumption, the general, if you read that, you would think, well, that must definitely be speaking about the Prophet ﷺ. But then the person transmitting says, I think he may be talking, I assume, he says it, you see the wording that he uses, he says, I assume he is indicating by that the Prophet. The problem with this twist of the narrator to say that is it brings in a whole realm of doubt. That why is he doubting that? See, he's saying that وَأَرَاهُ يَنْمِي إِلَى الرَّسُولِ, that I assume, or it appears to me, that he is indicating that that's the Prophet. So anyway, so this brings in a whole debate. The point is, if this is something which the Prophet did every day, and he prayed his salah like this, you would assume that there are hundreds and hundreds of transmissions describing this, which are sahih and unquestionably sahih and going back to the Prophet, and there ain't. There are not. There are ahadith that go back to the Prophet. They are all criticized in their chain, and those which are sahih are not clear. So they don't mention the Prophet in them. They just say that we used to do things like this. So which is interesting. Now you think, well, why is that? You think, well, come on. Hey, Mufti, come on. That should be pretty self-evident. And I say, well, funny you should say that. Because the thing is, then you have a hadith, which is also transmitted in all the major books of hadith, and more elaborately in some than others. Right now, this hadith that you have of Abu Humayd al-Sa'idi, now this hadith is one where there is a dispute going on amongst the companions on how to pray. And he says, right, okay, stand back, people. He says, Ana a'lamukum bi sifati salatin nabi. I am more knowledgeable than all of you on how the Prophet ﷺ used to pray. So he says, step back, let me show you. So they say, all right, fine. And he says that the Prophet would do this, and then he would stand straight, he would raise his hands for takbir. And then he does not mention in any of the riwayat the holding of the hands. So he mentions all the other things. He mentions holding the knees, doing tasbih, doing dhikr, doing this, doing that. But he does not mention. And what he does say is, he says that he did takbir, he says, and then he let his hands go حتى رجع كل عضو في محله معتدلا. He says, until every limb returned to its straight resting place. So here, some people said, well, couldn't this be the straight resting place? So you say, well, you know, I could concede to that, right? If I didn't know better. So you say, well, let's read on, Watson. And as you read on, you find that when he describes the rising from ruku', he says, and then when they stood up from ruku', and then have the same wording again. حتى يرجع كل عضو في محله معتدلا. Until each limb returns to its straight resting place. Now, when you get up from ruku', most schools do, rest their arms on the side. So, I know some Tafiyah, for example, in order for consistency, they then do that after. They then do that after ruku' as well in the Salah. But generally speaking, most of the madhabs recognize that a position of sadl after ruku'. So this is this hadith is incredibly interesting. Moving on from hadith, you see, several people have said, well, first of all, let's debunk some myths. Okay. Here's an interesting story, that Imam Malik was one day beaten up. Now, to be fair, Imam Malik was kind of inquisitioned, if you like, and he was, I don't know if full-on torture, he was tortured by being punished in front of people. It wasn't necessarily like an ongoing incident, but there was an incident where he wouldn't retaliate. He wouldn't he wouldn't go back on a particular ruling that he'd issued. So he'd said, and there's a huge debate over what this point was, but it generally referred to talaq, to do with divorce, and Imam Malik had said that the divorce, a forced, coerced talaq is not a talaq. And that is the transmission of Ibn Abbas, and talaqul mukrah laysa bi talaq. So why this caused a whole big hoo-ha in the first place? There's explanation around it. People say this was an indication to Imam Malik supporting the rebellion and the uprising of Muhammad Nafsakiyya and his brother Ibrahim in Kufa. But Muhammad Nafsakiyya was in Medina, and the political strife that was going on was that they were saying, we have given allegiance. And Imam Malik had been asked, and he kind of symbolically responded by saying, well, that a coerced talaq is not a talaq, meaning that read between the lines, as in a coerced allegiance is not a pledge of allegiance. That's anyway the predominant narrative. So the point being, Imam Malik was beaten. Now some people say by that beating he was lashed and so on. His shoulders were dislocated. Now, whether his shoulders were dislocated or not, Allahu A'lam, they may have been, but generally they don't transmit that his shoulders were dislocated. Some people say maybe they were dislocated. Now some people say because his shoulders were dislocated, he would pray like he couldn't raise his arms. Right now, so all his followers, out of dedication to him, started to hang their arms in Salah. This is the most absurd, ludicrous, pathetic, retarded explanation I've ever heard coming from any Muslim. This almost trumps all their other kind of... But anyway, let's not go there. The point is that if Imam Malik's shoulders were dislocated, let's just say they were. Let's say they were. I mean, he would have had them popped back in. I mean, if your shoulder gets dislocated, you're not going to, for the rest of your life, run around with dislocated shoulders, are you? You're going to obviously go to people that they can pop them back in, they can relocate them. So the thing is, so firstly, that's just say that I'm sure he had that much common sense. Secondly, just because Imam Malik, being the legend that he is and the Don of Medina, his shoulders, let's say hypothetically, became dislocated, all the Muslims that rate him are not going to start all of a sudden hanging their arms in Salah. And just as if, God forbid, let's say Imam Malik was to have lost a leg, so all the Muslims would stand on one leg in Salah out of honor for Imam Malik. I mean, for God's sake, have some respect for the intellects of the Muslim community. I mean, why do people think that the Muslims were so dumb? Why would they do something like that? So I just want to debunk that myth immediately. The other thing is, there are several narrations that you do find. Once again, narrations on both sides. You do find narrations to do with qabd, but all narrations to do with placing the hands anywhere are all problematic. Right, so there are other narrations that the Sahaba during certain times would clap their thighs to keep warm and stuff like that, and you could only do that if your hands were at the side. Another famous one is the hadith of who is it? Zayd ibn Aslam, isn't it? When he says about he came in and somebody, I think, sneezed and he said something and people started looking at him and he thinks, why are they? And he says, what's wrong with you? Why are you looking at me like that? And he's speaking about the verse had been revealed, but at this point he doesn't know that qumu lillahi qanitin, and stand for Allah in a state of deep submission, like with sincerity. And it meant as in when you stand in prayer, do not talk. But he was unaware of this ruling, so he's asking them, why are you, why are you looking at me like that? So he says, so they started to clap their thighs. Now this is interesting, that why their thighs? Because if they were standing in prayer like this, why would they start going like that? Why wouldn't they go like this? So, unless they were standing like that. That's an interesting one. Anyway, and the final icing on the cake, let's leave Imam Malik, the Don of Medina. Imam Malik, wallahi people, I have to sidetrack, but I feel is the savior for us, especially in the West today. And I want to come back to that, but I'll come back to that in fact. Let's just speak about this for a moment. Let's put Imam Malik aside, right? So, did you know who else used to pray like this? Well, how about Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu an from the Sahaba? It's documented. He would pray with sadl. Urwa ibn Zubayr, right, would pray with sadl. Hasan al-Basri in Basra would pray with sadl. Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa, would pray with sadl. Awza'i would say you could do either. Let's go to Egypt. Layth ibn Sa'ad, the famous, major Mujtahid Mutlaq, would pray with sadl. Right. Let's go to Medina. Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, the son-in-law of Abu Huraira radiallahu an, would pray with sadl. Let's look at the student of Ibn Abbas, Sa'id ibn Jubair, the famous, legendary Mujtahid who clashes with Hajjaj, would pray with sadl. Right, so these are some names that I've brought before you. One of the positions within the Hanbali school of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, is to pray with sadl. And then to top it off, the Don of Medina, Imam Malik ibn Anas, would pray with sadl. Okay, although he has transmitted as well to pray with qabd, in my understanding, and even if you go outside of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and look at any of those schools which predate the formation of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, like the Khawarij, for example, and even the Shia, if you look at them just as an observational kind of, not experiment, but as an observation, you will see that they also continue till today to pray with sadl. So sadl, as the Hafiz, the great master of Hadith, Ibn Abdul Barr, the Don and Spanish Muslim scholar, or the legend of Muslim Spain, says in his book Al-Kafi that Al-Qabd was sadl kilahuma sunnah. And he says that holding the hands like this or letting them drop, both are from the Sunnah. And he was a Hafiz, the most knowledgeable person of Hadith in the 5th century in the entire Western Muslim world. Undisputed. That's who he was, Ibn Abdul Barr. And he's the same person who Ibn Hazm says about him, that he says that when he's praising the legends and the legends of the past, the major mujtahids, and he says, وَمِمَّنْ أَدْرَكْنَا فِي عَصْرِنَا هَذَا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْإِجْتِهَادِ. And he says, and those who we today, we have reached, who themselves are dons and epitomize ijtihad, that they are mujtahids living and walking and breathing amongst us. He says Yusuf ibn Abdul Barr. Ibn Abdul Barr is one. His name was Yusuf, by the way. So this is him speaking anyway. So do not be mistaken by these very superficial kind of statements, okay? So that answers the question on sadl. It's definitely a sunnah. I'm not saying people have to do sadl. I'm not saying they have to do qabd. Whatever you do, both are from the way of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? Now, okay, that's it. I want to say a little point here now. I want to kind of go on to a side question, which is the school of Medina and Imam Malik. I seriously feel, people, and this is my take, and you know, it's I simply just present my ideas to you, you know. فَإِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَصْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. You know, you can take them with kindness or just dismiss them gracefully. The point is that Imam Malik, for us in this day and age, presents, he himself is a salvific, he is a savior, like a salvific figure, somebody who really can guide us to salvation. I don't mean by that necessarily that he has answered every question that we will be facing. He hasn't. But his method, he was the only Imam out of all of these Imams that today are rated and celebrated, and we respect them all, you know, ala ra'si wal ayn. But the point is, we respect them all, but out of all of these Imams, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad ibn, the only Imam who was undisputed in his fiqh and hadith. So nobody could question him, did he know hadith? He was Amirul Mu'minina fil hadith. He was more obsessed with the preservation of hadith than the so-called pseudo kind of hadithi people today. Right? He was the head of, in his time, what was known as the Ahlul Hadith movement. The Ahlul Hadith movement historically, which really historically in the time of the Salaf, was embodied by the school of Hijaz. And by Hijaz it was predominantly two cities, Mecca and Medina, and predominantly led by Imam Malik. And then you had Sufyan ibn Uyayna and other people as well as part of that movement. Now Imam Malik, despite being the head of this movement, he was somebody at the same time who firmly believed in reason. Firmly, that faith would make no sense without reason. In the Muwatta, which is, as Imam al-Shafi'i said, that ma wudi ala al-ardi kitabun as-sahhu, he says that there is no book on this earth more authentic ba'da kitabillah min kitabi Malik. That after the book of Allah, that is more authentic than the book of Malik. And people may say, yes, he said that when Bukhari wasn't authored or whatever, but I mean, who cares? The point is, even Imam Bukhari himself, when asked who is the heavyweight, this is Imam Bukhari being asked, who is the ultimate heavyweight of hadith, which chain is the, you know, it's the unbreakable unsinkable. It's the donest of don chains in hadith. Who is it? He said it is unquestionably an Malik, an Nafi, an Ibn Umar. It is the golden chain, he said, a silsilatul dhahabiyah, which is from Malik, from Nafi, from Ibn Umar. Now this thing, you see, Imam Malik, despite having at least the most authentic chain we have in the world today, yet in his book, which many believe to be the most authentic book of hadith, on several hadith, after quoting them, rejects them. He is quoting them. He is quoting them, people. He is telling you they are sahih. He is telling you he is the Don. Amirul Mu'mineen is the heavyweight. He's wearing the belt of heavyweightness. That is one of the ultimate accolades you could have in the hadith sciences. Amirul Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers in hadith. He is bringing you hadith and then saying, no, sorry, we don't act according to that. Nah, our practice doesn't recognize this. There's two ways of approaching this. One is just to look at those isolated practices and then start saying, oh, that's interesting. Oh, right. Oh, wow. I see. And you've got other evidences and so on. I'm not interested right now in that. I mean, that's great and it's amazing and many ulama have done that. I'm interested in this methodology. Right. So the point is, this methodology of saying, well, look, we've got amazing hadith. This sahih hadith, but I'm sorry. A hadith in itself does not overrule it is not authoritative. Imam Malik is saying, here I present it and here I tell you we don't accept it. This is the middle path that will save many people today that are questioning their faith. Wallahi, I can almost swear by that there are people today that are being force-fed hadith, force-fed them. You have to accept, you have to accept. They're being pitted against Allah, that if you question these, you are challenging Allah and His Messenger. And many just submit, and then some, they snap. And this leads to the other extreme, that they denounce all hadith. The hadith, we don't want hadith. Reject them. And thereby they forego an amazing, magnificent portion of this sharia. Right? And the middle way is the way of Medina, the way by Imam Malik, that certain hadith you reject, even if they're sahih. But if they clash with the overall message of this deen, if they clash with reason that is firmly and soundly established, then there is a huge question mark looming over them. Okay. And I wanted to clarify that because a lot of people misunderstand this thing and they take extremes. And I feel this is, and if this path had been shown to us by any other Imam, he may have been questioned. That yes, that's because he wasn't a don in hadith. That's because he never knew hadith. That's because, this is why I said that Imam Malik is that savior. Because he is one who cannot be questioned for his authority. Do you know, in a transmission he said when on the death of one of his teachers, he said at home, I have a trunk, a whole, like a massive chest full, like a drawer kind of thing, a large container full of hadith transmitted by him, and I haven't till date transmitted one of them. And they said to him, yeah, Imam, but why? And he said, because those hadith, that we don't accept them. They don't make sense, and if to transmit them is only to be a fitna. So this is an understanding of who. This is somebody who is learning from the students of those who met the Messenger of Allah. So anyway, I thought I'd give a little intro there to the School of Medina. I've done some lectures on this. Watch out for them. You can go to YouTube There's a lecture of mine called The School of Medina in the 21st Century. Check it out. It's an audio. It is quite lengthy, but I hope you benefit from it. There is another one as well called The Way of Imam Malik. Get on to those people and let me know your thoughts. Stay in touch. Right. So now I've heard, let's see, what are the reflections of the situation in Aleppo? Abdul Ahad, subhanallah, what a question, huh? The thing is, I was just saying to somebody, I was saying to, a friend of mine just recently that I was on Facebook and somebody had shared like a 360-degree view of a walk they were conducting down some street in Aleppo. So it's one of those where you can kind of flick through the camera, you can kind of rotate the camera and you can look around and the person's just taking a walk, nothing much is happening, and you can just see like maybe some children in the corner, an old person just walking up the road, and you can flick the camera, you can look up to the top, the sky, the ground, you can... Amazing technology. But I mean, I was just taking a look at that. It was on Facebook. Wallahi, I have to say, it shattered my heart that to see what they've done. It doesn't matter who they are. They have destroyed that place. I mean, and by that place, I mean civilization there. In all honesty, it will probably take 100 years to restore any kind of true, meaningful, thriving civilization in that place. The buildings were all dilapidated, they were destroyed, there was just rubble everywhere. There were generally the place, there were some people around, there were people, but you could tell in general it was a ghost town. The buildings, obviously this was a different city, Aleppo, but many years back when in the late 90s when I studied in Damascus, and you could see that the design work and everything was just identical. It was the same kind of design, the same kind of style, the same kind of... And it was a beautiful place. It was a beautiful place. I mean, it had its problems. God knows it had its problems. But they were nothing like what has become today. And it's almost despairing to see it, because there is no... we're in such... As a Muslim community, we're in such a mess. Such a mess. It's almost like there's no hope. Like what do you do with the, I mean, I say that, I mean, I know there's no humor in it, but I mean, what do you do with the Muslim world? It's kind of, I don't know. I mean, there's people want to live their lives. Islam's become something different. It's no longer about a natural way of life. It's all about, some kind of like false aspirations and a claim to power, and it's, I don't know, Allahul Musta'an. May Allah make easy the struggle for each and all, and may He, restore hope, dignity and civilization to these war-torn lands. May He protect us all from such fitna. I tell you, the fitna of civil war is probably amongst the greatest fitan there are. Wallahu a'lam. Okay. Let's take some more questions now. Right. I was just about to take a question there. Is every type of show-off shirk asghar? Adib Shams. Is every type of show-off shirk asghar? Of course it isn't. And we need to... I mean, I completely disagree with this culture of... I completely disagree with this culture of... Sorry, I'm just trying to stop these questions from going up so fast. Right. Somebody saying, what should I... I mean, you could keep answering a question, typing in the question. I don't know. I'll try and answer. I know I can't answer all the questions. Right. So anyway, the thing is... I forgot what I was about to say then. Forgotten now. No, shirk asghar. I'm not in this whole culture of, oh my God, people, oh my God, don't even say me. Saying me is shirk. Oh my God, oh my God. It's kind of mega, uber humility. I don't know, me as a person, I find it kind of ridiculous. And, you know, Allah says in the Quran about people, you know, وَيُحِبُّونَ أَن يُحْمَدْ, that people love to be praised. People, what did the Prophet say in the Quran? The Prophet said, وَجَعَلْ لِي لِسَانَ صِدْقٍ فِي الْآخِرِينَ, and place for me a praising tongue in those who come after me. I mean, these are the prophets telling you, this is human. I mean, chill out, yaar. Live life a little. Let people be praised. I mean, arrogance is something else. Arrogance is a sense of like belittling others. But there is no harm in being praised or in showing of Inna Allah yuhibbu an yara athra ni'mati ala abdi. Allah wants to see His blessings upon you in amongst the people. So that's my understanding. Right, let's take some questions, people. Let's take some questions. Why could you explain Barzakh, time spent in the grave after we die? Do we feel the happiness or sadness through our soul? We give informed destiny. Right, I think that Imam Hassan, first of all, a shout out. Right, all right, look at this. This is a sign, and if you're wondering, it's not. I'm not carrying this because it's got the flag of gay pride on it. It's my daughter's. It's a football. Le jao. Let's go. Right. So the point is now. You see, there's very little we truly know about the afterlife. One thing I can say, in my understanding, I feel there will be it will be a sense of timelessness, and it will be very fast, the Barzakh thing. Because when you look at the Quran describing those who have risen from their graves, they will say, Kam labithna, ma labith, and somebody will say, yawman or nisfa yawm, like it's only been half a day at best. Like they can't even remember what it was. It was just like somebody says, weren't we just put in right now? So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But I feel it will just, Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam. I mean, what can we say? Our hope from Allah is always great and positive. Why is sadl criticized? Because it is by people who can't accept it. Can you explain short so you can answer us all? Right, topic, the sex slaves in the Quran. The Quran gives women their full rights, then how does one account for the right to have female slaves? How can they provide consent? Crystal, naughty. It's a sting operation, isn't it? Trying to get me all... Look, there are certain things which, in all honesty, when we look back at the way that they may have been practiced in the past, they will not make much sense to us today. That's because the world has changed. I do not believe these things are permissible today. And in short, I believe that the Quran set out, and Islam set out, what we call trajectory hermeneutics. So trajectory ethics. That it set out ethics in a way that it would continue to evolve, and their ethics would continue to develop until they reach that maqam. So it does it at an arch. Once they reach that maqam, the thing is no longer permitted. So I believe that's my understanding of how Islam set out things like the rules on slavery as a whole. So slavery today is forbidden. I don't believe Islam would accept it today. Although it did previously, but it set out hermeneutics in a way to say that destruction is on its way. Acha Zaraji aap kahiye. That face, not coming. Right, so okay. Right, so Hi guys. Jao. Acha Jao. This is the devil incarnate, people. If I ever believed in jinn possession, I'd believe it because of her. Okay, so go on, off you go. Right, so the thing is, look, so I hope that explains things. Yeah, I don't accept the consent. The sexual thing is complicated, and it does give rise to many problems. And sometimes it is a bit of ले जाओ यहाँ पे ये गिर जाएगा ले जाओ यहाँ से ले जाओ So the thing is that you see, if you, because on one hand, in a way, sometimes it is a slap in the face for those who go on about this hyperbolic kind of modesty, that, and yet they push concepts like that, that how can you speak about somebody not even being allowed to uncover a face, and on the other hand, you're prepared to force yourself on women just because they don't belong, you know, they don't have the, and this, it shows this disparity. And I think this is one of the challenges for us Muslims today to, in this century, really, and especially Muslims in the West, to evaluate certain aspects and come up with answers as well. And Zara? Bloody hell, she's going to cause destruction in the... That's my work area, so she's going to mess it up. Zara? Niche jao? Right, so the thing is, anyway, so the point being that I feel we have, that it is a reminder for many of us that, okay, right, sorry people, just one moment, I'm gonna have to, damn, I can't even. Oh, damn. Sorry, people. I'm just going to have to give me a few seconds. There's going to be destruction here. Sorry, yeah. Right, so anyway, sorry about that, people. So I do feel that is a very strong question. I don't know if I have necessarily the whole holistic answer, but I have an answer, and that is my understanding. In terms of the sexual consent, I think there was a greater narrative at play, and that was that people... I mean, I know, you see, once again, we wouldn't be able to truly understand it, but I think it was part of that understanding that they had, that this is what happens in slavery. And weirdly, they had all kind of accepted in some way. And I know that's not, it doesn't sound, but it's a bit like saying that if you were a slave today, how would you not think about running away? You would definitely think about running away. Yet, they were often, this was the norm for slaves to take money, to go to the marketplace, do the shopping, come home, travel to different towns, buy stock, come back. If you were a slave and you were let out of the house, how would you ever think about coming back? It does not make any sense. And yet that was even that was considered so weird that a slave would have the desire to run away. How, if you read a lot of the historical accounts of slaves, they used to just embrace the fact they were a slave. Now, so what I'm trying to say by that is we can't understand that mentality. I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm trying to explain that we can't understand it. That's all. So, so the point is that there are a lot of difficult questions. The sexual thing ties into that, as I mentioned, that people kind of, and I think Islam, when it condoned it, it did so just on the basis of pragmatism. That it was almost inconceivable that you would have somebody that is, you know, you have that sense of authority over, for a man and a woman, and you to be isolated and doing all the, and you would not be having sex. I mean, it was, in my understanding, because it was deemed so almost, you know, it was going to happen 100%. By giving certain rights, and then, well, they are a bit like a then they're like almost like a semi-wife status, that they have this, they cannot, you know, if they get pregnant, they automatically become free, they have this, they have these rights, they must be provided for, they must be taken care of. And I think that was just a pragmatic solution to a particular problem, which it set out a trajectory to outlaw in the future. I hope that's some... what are the pros and cons of interfaith dialogue? I mean, I think, David, there's always, dialogue always has positives to it. So I think there's always benefits in building bridges, you know. So I think that's just a very straightforward question. Ahmed Larson, a joke. All right. Thank you. Right. Should talk about Aleppo instead of these unnecessary fiqh. Everyone wants to know about it. Right. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna block that person right there. See, the thing is, look, I just spoke about Aleppo. Okay, look, I can stand here and you can sit wherever you are and you can cry and you can, you know, burst out in tears. You can fast. You can stop eating luxuries. It's not going to change the situation in Aleppo. We are 100% powerless from a grand point of view. Okay, so the Muslim leaders may be able to intervene. We may be able to play an activist role in doing something, and many Muslims are. And to come on here and assume that just because you're speaking, because I'm sitting here now, I'm not doing anything. How would you know what I'm not doing? I mean, do I have to share my entire life with you? Do I have to share every other group that I'm a part of, or things that I get involved with, or charities that I give, or that I don't give, or that I mean, so just because I'm taking some time out to answer people's question, to make such an arrogant assumption that I have no value. I've already spoken about Aleppo today. So to make an assumption that I have zero value for the lives and the tragedies that are being conducted worldwide, I think is extremely arrogant on your behalf and is demonstrative of the damn problem that we're facing, which is Muslims too busy trying to just play, I don't know, or like dictator with other Muslims. You know, that is our problem, that everybody just wants to tell everybody else off. I wonder what you were doing. I mean, what the hell are you doing on Facebook Live watching me? You know, why ain't you saving Aleppo? I mean, how the hell are you going to save it anyway? So, I mean, look, so people need to stop this, get off this high horse. Sometimes reality is brutal. It is like that. My heart bleeds just as yours does. But I mean, I can't do anything to stop it. If I was in a position of power, I would stop it in a blink. Okay, I would stop it in a blink, but I'm not in a position of power. So, chill out, people. Chill the hell out. You're just working me up for no reason. Right, so, right, can a woman wear perfumes in public? Waqar Hassan, yes she can, in my understanding. That is a good question. You see, I think there is a distinction between something which becomes the norm and something which is extraordinary to attract a massive amount of attention. Right, so I'm just trying to stop these questions from rising. Right, so historically, in some societies, certain perfumes were not the kind of norm. Okay, so people did not, you know, like they had a slight touch of perfume. So all the women, even in the Prophet's time, they would bathe in certain water that they would mix certain herbs in and rose water in and stuff like this. So they would have that fragrance and smell. But they wouldn't have like doses and doses and doses of perfume all over them. So when one or two women just suddenly tried that, you can imagine what that created. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ was telling off. Okay. He was not saying people shouldn't smell nice. They should. And especially in a society where this becomes the norm. Okay. This becomes the norm, and the alternative, especially in societies where people work up close. You see, we are not so often in the open air and so on, you know, like they were in 7th century Arabia or so on, or in certain parts of the world today. People work indoors in buildings. Okay. And to not smell nice, right, or to smell, and that doesn't mean you need to flood yourself with perfume. That would just be silly. I mean, everybody would consider that silly. But to smell like almost repulsive, or to have body odor is ridiculous. And body odor and things like that would be more apparent in a society that is up close, where people are always, so to always, you know, have deodorant, have I don't know, antiperspirant, to have perfume. This is from, I believe it's from the hallmark of the Islamic civilization. To smell, and the appearance is always good. Right, so I think you can draw a very firm line there, okay. Good to see the haram police. Since we don't meet the prerequisites for a valid Salah or Jum'ah. Right, Yusuf, I believe that Jum'ah is permitted wherever we are. It's not, I don't take the view that, although I do agree that Jum'ah in its fundamental basis was perhaps more of an, it was more linked to governance of power than it was to do with, I feel it has many strands to it, yes? So it's a communal thing, so it has a community spirit element. It has a strand of worship, unquestionably. It has a strand of learning, so, the khutbah. It has a strand of governance, or power of governance, or the governance of power. But I feel the governance element, or this link to the governance of power, was a strong part of Jum'ah. And it was done to establish the strength of Muslims, but also to remind them who ruled and stuff like this, and this had remained the practice throughout the Muslim land. So if you read, I'll tell you who's got an interesting piece. George Maqdisi on his The Rise of Islamic Colleges. It's a very interesting piece, actually. I didn't finish the whole thing, but I read almost about at least half of it. And the thing is, in it, when he speaks about, through research, of how masjids could be opened anywhere, but Jami', a place where Jummah took place, would only be allowed, you could only open that if it was sanctioned by the ruler. And they were all documented. So you could be an imam in a mosque somewhere, which doesn't make a difference, or a musalla, but not in a jami'. A jami' would only be authorized by the ruler, because you would always have to mention his name in the khutbahs, and by way of this, people would know who the ruler is as well. And it's interesting, so a lot of the major imams, this is a good point as well, that a lot of the major imams throughout Islamic history have never led Jummah prayers ever in their lives. So Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, none of these people ever led a single Jummah prayer in their life. They never gave a Jummah khutbah, ever. Right, so, but that said, I do feel that it is valid wherever you do it. Okay, so, right, so, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam, Ustad Khalid Ahmed. All right, Imam Malik here, I come, bring it on, that's the way. So how do you distinguish between custom and sunnah, sitting on the floor and eating? Okay, well, the thing is, a sunnah is, you see, it depends. If you're just being linguistic, then I suppose a sunnah could be any action of the Prophet, but that is not the technical sunnah. A technical sunnah is an action which God has mandated from you, but without obligation. So God wants you to do them. Not just the fact that the Prophet did them. So, for example, people are going to say, well, and some things are just, human things. So people can say, yeah, well, the Prophet used to sleep. So the Prophet used to breathe. Is breathing sunnah. Oh look, I'm doing acts of sunnah. No, you're not. Okay, this is not a religious act. This is just a human. It's just part of living. Okay, every human being will do that. So these things are not the legal Islamic definition of sunnah. The definition of sunnah is an action which the Prophet has told you is rewarded by the deen. He has encouraged it. He has openly expressed it and encouraged it and generally practiced it. And usually they say with consistency. Ma wadhaba alayhi. That he consistently practiced it. So in a nutshell, it's what Allah wants you to do, and He will reward you, but without obligation. So so the question is, does Allah want the whole world to look like Arabs? No, because that would be silly. Because then why is Allah praising the diversity of human beings? Why is He praising our different cultures and our different, why would he do this? And why would the Prophet be a messenger, for all of humanity, Bashiran wa Nadhira, for the whole of humanity, but rather than just being to the Arabs and an imposed Arabicism of the world? That's nonsense. So that doesn't make any sense. So the Prophet, and if you look at things that the Prophet, he didn't do exclusively as religion. So the fact that the Prophet sat on the floor, but all of Arabia in his time generally sat on the floor. They did sit on chairs as well, but they generally sat on the floor. So if you went in Mecca before Islam, they were already doing that. So it's not an Islamic custom. Neither are clothes. So when the Prophet went to Tabuk, which was under Roman rule at the time, he wore a Roman thobe. So these kind of things, the clothing is not part of an Islamic identity. Unfortunately, today people have made it so because we're so superficial. That we've made these things as part of identity, and they're not. And this is what causes the problem. Shaykhana Mahmoud Sha'ban, ahlan wa sahlan. Right, the people, those of you that don't know, that Sheikh Mahmoud Sha'ban in the house, right there, in the house. Right, so موفق وإياك حياك الله وعافاك شيخنا وسلم على الشيخين. Those of you that don't know, the two Don Malikis of Egypt, Sheikh Mahmoud Sha'ban is very close to them. Sheikh Ahmed Taha Rayyan, a heavyweight of Maliki fiqh worldwide, unquestionably, people. And also you have Abdul Sabur Sayyid, Sheikh Abdul Sabur Sayyid as well. Wasn't Imam Shafi'i an authority in the sciences as well as the founder of Usul Fiqh? He was, but he what I was trying to say is he was critiqued on hadith. He himself says as well that his knowledge in hadith is it's not as strong as he would like it to be. Obviously, by our standards, it was legendary. But I mean, by their own standards, it wasn't as top as some of the others. Should you recite the Basmallah after Fatiha and before the surah in the Fard prayers? Alex, no, you shouldn't. And that was the practice of the people of Medina. You do not recite the Basmallah we do not generally consider the Basmallah to be, it is a part of the Quran in the sense that in Surah An-Naml, إنه من سليمان وإنه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, when Sulaiman alayhi salam sends the letter to Bilqis. But beyond that, when we start a surah, every surah, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alif Lam Mim, this Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is not actually a part of the Quran, it's a Sunnah. So the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to recite it like that, so that's how we recite it. The Quran is the actual surah, it's not actually Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That is the understanding of the people of Medina, okay, and as transmitted by Imam Malik. Khalil Chowdhury, Abu Hanifa had a similar methodology. Absolutely, Abu Hanifa is a legend. The only problem with Imam Abu Hanifa is today, Imam Abu Hanifa has not just today, for centuries, his madhhab has kind of really taken a 180. And it's become, and I borrow the term from Dr. Sherman Jackson, that crypto Shafi'ization has taken place. That they've become Shafi'i in methodology. So they've kind of rejected all this reasoning, except the fact that their madhab is built upon it. But what they do is they accept whatever's previously there, and they refuse to accept anything else. And even what's there, it's all become about Bukhari and Muslim. And this, it's very, so the madhab today, and for centuries, for at least, I would assume, at least maybe 6 to 8 centuries, has not reflected the early attitude of Imam Abu Hanifa at all. So one of my favorite books, actually, and it was summarized, I've got to reorganize all of these, by the way. So, but it's known by Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, his Shara' Ma'ani al-Athar, and there was a summary of it done by Ibn Rushd, and it's amazing because all of his book, he is just showing reasoning all the way through. Like he'll say, here's a hadith, we don't, and it's really, and it is fascinating. And he will say, and by the way, they refer to reasoning as nazar. Okay, they don't refer to it as aql, and I think, although they do mean in general aql, but because the term aql unfortunately became a casualty of ideological warfare. So the war that took place between Ahl Sunnah and the Mu'tazila, one of the casualties of war, unfortunately, which we still suffer from today, is the demonization of the aql. So Muslims began to, in order to attack the Mu'tazila, they began to demonize the aql. In fact, we are the only tradition, probably the only civilization that actually considers the intellect to be negative. Like, I mean, but anyway, so what a lot of scholars would do is they would avoid that term and they would use the term nazar, which means reason. So instead of saying intellect, they would say reason, right? So this is why, and Imam Abu Ja'far is a good example. So he brings several hadith. A good example is like the black dog is a demon. And he brings this and says this hadith makes no sense. He says a dog is a dog. No other dog is a demon. The color black in any other animal doesn't make it a demon. Therefore, this is inconsistent and so on. And this is the understanding of our Imam Abu Hanifa. And I think he's a legend for doing what he did, really. Unfortunately, not as celebrated by the Hanafiya as, in my understanding, he ought to be. Right, so difference of... right, so Usul in Shafi'i and Maliki. Right, the 100 years of making... 100 years of making money for corporations. Maybe that was the objective. Not sure what that's in relation to. Yep, I mean a lot of hierarchy, which never was. Islamic Dark Ages, Mawlid. See, this Mawlid thing, I mean, I've answered this before on so many occasions. Look, I don't know. You see, if you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's a difference of opinion. A lot of the early Malikiya, for a few centuries, including Imam Malik, were not down with this kind of thing. In fact, this practice didn't exist till at least 400 years, at least, after the Prophet ﷺ. It came into practice about 5th century Islamic era, and then it started to probably became more accepted by the 6th century and 7th century onwards. It probably becomes at least 50% of the Muslim culture, perhaps, or more. And in our times, it's become the outright majority. It does not mean that you love the Prophet more by celebrating his birthday. But I mean, if you want to do that, fine, just do it. I mean, I don't see a big deal, really. But I'll be honest with you, I don't like this kind of these green lights everywhere and this shape of a shoe, and this has become symbolic of something, and of a sandal, and I don't like this kind of like small little Kaabas being stuck on top of the whole parade of people, with the whole parade of people, dressed, it's just strange in this bogey green, and bombarding the streets, and this is going to trigger Islamophobia. Look, it is going to do it. Like, let's picture. Look, let's just be serious. Okay, let's flip the screen. Imagine Hindus started doing that with Ganesh, or with... People are going to say, why do you always mention Ganesh? Okay, with Ramji ke saath. Right, why? Imagine they started to get their statues and this long parade, all dressed in orange, marching thousands of people in our streets. Like, let's say, how would you feel? Let's just be honest. Like, people don't mind what you do. Just don't impose it, and don't just force it in people's faces. It's just nonsense. I don't like folklore. Honestly, I see that folklore is the death of reason. And if you want to celebrate, some people say, look, I love the Prophet, I read some qasaid, I read some nasheeds, we get together, we learn about the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, we talk about great things about the Prophet, we have an inspiration, we feed people, we do, great. In many ways, you're doing much more than somebody like me. But I think this stuff is, in my understanding, is silly. Okay, this kind of all this, and I hate the green they use. This bogey green. It's like all everywhere, splattered all over the houses, the Christmas lights, it's just so, and this has become symbolic, and I don't like this. I'm just expressing my view, but Mawlid in itself, in and of itself, is arbitrary. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. Okay, if you don't do it, it doesn't make you a bad person. I don't personally celebrate the Mawlid. Like I said, I follow what Imam Malik did in the early. To me, it's just a normal day, like any other day. But I mean, if to them it's a special day, they want to celebrate it, then I respect that. I'm honored by their love for the Prophet ﷺ. I'm probably just too lazy to do anything myself. Truth might be it's just laziness, but. Anyway, so that's in summary, and we need to really grow out of these, and may Allah make things easy. So, I want to study the religion, Aqeedah, and its proofs, or English resources, or better off learning Arabic first. Khalil, I would definitely say, you see, I'm sure there are a lot of things in English, but my Islamic reading, you see, first of all, I don't read as much as I wish I did. I listen a lot more than I read. So I'm usually always listening to podcasts and lectures, but I don't read as much. And the Islamic reading that I do is almost always in Arabic. I don't think I've probably got one or two books somewhere in English that are linked to Islam, but usually they've probably just been gifted to me. I've not. So I don't know really, but there is a lot of, I would say in Arabic, an awesome book which I think Muslims ought to teach is the Asas al-Taqdis, is the base of sanctification by Fakhruddin Razi, or so I think that is really important. I wish places like Madaris would take that up. You know you love rainbow. To follow those, we have to. How do you explain to those why do we have to follow a madhhab? Islam, following a madhhab is not an Islamic obligation like that. In the sense, you're not sinful if you don't follow a madhhab. But following a madhhab is the only commonsensical approach to having an in-depth understanding of the Sharia. It's to make a basis from which you can build. It doesn't, and it's also a way of thinking. So, and this is why I know people don't follow it, but that's because usually they don't have that basis and they don't have that in-depth understanding of the deen. And if they do, they usually have always studied from a madhhab. Even the Salafis today in Saudi Arabia all teach the Hanbali madhhab as a basis, because they've even realized that there's no way around this. You can't circumvent this. So, that's what it is. Otherwise, following a madhhab in itself is not an Islamic obligation per se. But you can watch my YouTube video on that. Right, Abdullah, awesome. I've answered that. What made you prefer the Maliki madhhab? I didn't choose the school of Medina. The school of Medina chose me. That's awesome, man. There's too many things I can't say. Too many things. Jamila Khan, wa alaikum assalam. What's your view on Hudood Laws? You see, the thing is, this is an interesting question. It's very, it can be quite controversial. The thing is, it ties in with the slavery thing I said earlier on, which is to do with trajectory hermeneutics. I feel that the Quran came to us in a time primarily addressing the people it came to, because they were the most important vessel for Islam. They had to be brought into this idea. The first effective community would have then shaped and dictated Islam and how it will forever be or will not be in time to come. So it was too important that it addressed them. So most, not all, but many things in the Quran are directly linked to them. And they are a reminder or a kind of parallel or a parable for others who come after. They are a point of reflection for others who come after. And there will be many things in there that will still directly involve others that come after. And there will be some things which may be just, more reflectionary. So that's the understanding of the Quran. So the Quran comes for example, its message of Tawheed will forever be, and that is the most important message of the Quran. Perhaps a third of the Quran is all about just believing, accepting Allah, and that will forever always be. Then a huge portion of the Quran is all about stories of the past. And that in itself is not really law-giving, that's just kind of reminders and reflectionary and stuff like this. And then there's several verses to do with ahkam, to do with laws. And these obviously they're relevant to everybody, but they may change, some of which may change their manifestation depending on the environment. As an example, let's take a look at slavery as an example. That's a good example, which I've already explained, so I won't go into too much. Let's take another example like zihar. So the Quran has a whole, we can't say paragraph, but it has, if we were to describe it, almost as 2 paragraphs, almost like several verses dedicated to this ruling of zihar. Now zihar to us is absolutely irrelevant. So zihar, even to the generations which came just after the Prophet, it became irrelevant. So zihar was a pre-Islamic practice of conducting divorce, where somebody would say to his wife that in order to divorce her, he would say, well, you know what, you, to me, you, in essence, they would say, you're like my mum now. People are thinking, sick games going on there. This is not the Oedipus complex, people. But the point is, what they would say, and the way they would phrase it, is they would say, your back to me is like the back of my mother. Meaning that the way I wouldn't sexually approach my mother is like touch her back or touch her in that sexual manner. I will not approach you in that. So we no longer have this sexual tie, and therefore over and out. Off you go, please. Are you going to call the cab, or should I call? Can you imagine taxis then on a camel? They just turn up like an Uber. Naam, qad wasalt. So the point is, the thing is, now this, even in the time of the Prophet, had massively decreased, but it was still present. In the communities after the Prophet, like I don't even mean long after, like in the Tabi'een time, the student of the Sahaba, in their student, like Imam Malik's time, this was definitely not a practice anymore. Nobody divorced their wife with this kind of wording of, hey, your back is like the back of my mum, your legs are like the legs of my mum, and stuff like this. I mean, nobody used that kind of wording. It was obsolete. To them, it was archaic. So the point is, well, the Quran, this was revealed. And in it, because the person came to the Prophet and said, look, I've got, I said this to my wife. And he was kind of regretful and remorseful. And he didn't want to really part ways. He just got angry and said it. But you see, to me, what's more important is the methodology, is the kind of reason, not the, it's like the fabric, the inner meaning. You see, these several verses were revealed in which Allah said, look, what you guys are saying is nonsense. It's just zur. It's just a fabrication. You're saying she's like your mum. She's not like your mum. You're just saying something which is nonsensical. You're calling her back like the back of your mother. She's not like the back of your mother. So I tell you what, here's an expiation. Why don't you either fast or so-and-so or free a slave? Once again, the hint on freeing as many slaves as you can. And then everything's okay. So the Quran came with some hope to say, look, relax, it's not over. You can carry on, but you know what? For kind of breaking her heart and disparaging her and trying to tell her that you won't sexually approach her and stuff like this, and the fact that she reminds you of her mum and things like this in a sexual way, right? Because of that, here's an expiation you can give, a kafara. Now, why would Allah reveal this when nobody after that era would ever practice this? The thing is, there was a greater message of hope. The fact that that Allah was teaching them to still salvage things. But that's another point. I don't want to sidetrack, but my purpose of saying this is there are several rulings which primarily came to address the people the Quran was revealed in. Now, hudud is one of those things. The punishments that were set out in the Quran, they were not unique to the Muslims. The Arabs, the communities were already doing these things. So the stoning was a Jewish practice. It was something that from the Bible, the biblical communities, some of which were still conducting, especially the Jewish communities, they had things like that. And they had other versions as well, but they had this concept of stoning. The cutting off the hand, several communities were doing things like that. So the Quran came with a norm that fitted their understanding, that they was the norm then. Once again, it came in line with trajectory hermeneutics, that as human ethics would continue to develop, these rulings would change. So in the time of the Prophet, although there was some understanding of imprisoning people, or not imprisoning them, but holding them captive, but prisons didn't exist within the Arabian Peninsula the way they later emerged as prisons. So they start to emerge later on. In the time of the Prophet, there were no prisons. Now some people say, I know the Prophet imprisoned or held people captive in the masjid, but that's not a prison. It may have a similarity, but the purpose, what I'm trying to say is that certain civilizations would continue to develop. So this understanding it's not modern, right? So I know people, and here's another important thing. People are going to say, well, oh, you're saying this to suck up to the West. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not. Okay. I'm saying this because this is how I understand things. Now, for your understanding, just to shed some light, one of the most outspoken scholars on this topic, Abu Qasim al-Barzali, who was a Maliki legend, lived 700 years ago. I mean, do you think colonialism wasn't at its peak then? It wasn't, it wasn't kind of ruling the world then. He clearly spoke and he ruled, and he said that the hudud in his day and age, that people have changed and the hudud ought to meet the ethical developments. Now, this is Maliki fiqh. Okay, he was saying this. Now, he writes about this prolifically, and I know people challenged him, and people disagreed with him. Ibn Shamma' is one of those that disagreed with him, and I accept that. And the Tunisian king at the time, from the Hafsid kind of dynasty, was first influenced by al-Barzali, and then later goes to Shamma', and then, according to some narrations, comes back to al-Barzali. Al-Barzali is then followed by several Malikis that come generation after generation, until this becomes the norm in several societies within several parts of the Maghrib. Right, this was what they said, ma jara bihil al-urf, or this was what they had, ma jara bihil amal, in several places. That they would accept financial penalties instead of cutting off the hand, they said that there would be a fine for it instead. Now, you may disagree with that, and I respect that. You may disagree. But the thing is, this view, this argumentation is 700 years old. At least when it's being openly argued for. Like very openly in writing, and becomes the norm in a huge part of the Muslim world. Centuries after centuries, it's the same time Imam Shatibi is writing his book on the objectives of the Sharia, because there seems to be this realization at this time. And this continues, right? Several people You have Ibn Khojo and all these other Malikiyah that continue this line of thinking. Right up until our recent times, you have the famous Sheikh Yahya al-Wulati al-Maliki from Mauritania. Over 100 years ago, he has this very famous book on usul and things like this, known as Yahya al-Faqih, writing about this, promoting this, saying that since the ethics have changed, this is the view. For those people who are going to be shocked by this, did you know that the Hanbali Madhhab, in its it has different opinions, but according to what they call the Azharul Riwayat, the most apparent of its rulings, says all hudud, all capital punishments are dropped by simple tawbah. Did you know that? By simple tawbah. That the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, when they tried to stone this person and he ran away, and they caught him and the Prophet later reprimanded them. Halla taraktumuhu, if only you'd left him alone. Fayatubu Allahu alayhi, that he would have done tawbah, Allah would have done tawbah on him. It's in the Musnad of Ahmad. The point is that this view has existed. This was one of the older views of Imam Shafi'i, that all hudud drop with tawbah. The hadith, Ibn Hajar brings the riwayah, there's a hadith in Sahih Bukhari, but there's other narrations to it. When the companion comes and says, I've committed a crime. And the Prophet says, what? And in one hadith he just says, well, they say that, some people say, well, he had been kissing this woman and things like this. But in the other hadith, the narrations Ibn Hajar brings, he says, Qad zanayt, I did zina. And the Prophet says, well, have you prayed? And he says, yes. And he says, well, this sin has been forgiven. And Ibn Hajar is transmitting the, and he says, well, this is one of it shows the Hanbali view that say that tawbah drops all punishments, capital punishments. My point is that this thing that today Muslims feel champions our Sharia, it does not champion our Sharia. And it has begun to compromise the message. Because people think Islam is all about these 5 punishments or whatever they are, which are today deemed by non-Muslims definitely, and even many Muslims, but they're deemed as something medieval. They're deemed as something people have moved away from corporal punishment, of beating people up and cutting off hands and doing stuff like this. This is so, and people will say, yeah, but a due process but people have turned away from this. So what happens is the message gets compromised. The overall message. So people today are prepared to compromise the reason Allah made communication with mankind to recognize Him over a fiqh ruling that has so much ikhtilaf over it. So I think, look, that's my message. That, look, I believe that these things today would be substituted, because the ethics have developed in line with the view of thinking of many. And this is the view of legendary shuyukh today, like Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya, an amazing legendary scholar, currently residing in the UAE. So the point is, I hope that adds some light on that. Right. Jinn possession, Hanzala, please watch my previous clips. I've really elaborated on them in great reason. All right, last 1-2 questions, people. Some quick. Let's take some rapid round questions and call this a night. Right, let's see. Right, Muslim women praying with men. That in the time of the Prophet, Muslim women and men used to pray together without a barrier. That is the way of the Prophet ﷺ, but they didn't generally pray side by side. The women prayed in a row behind and the men in front, and that's absolutely fine. If a person was praying with his own wife or somebody like this, or a family member, side by side, the scholars have spoken about it. The salah would generally be valid. It's not that it wouldn't, and there is some dispute. I know some of the schools, the Hanafiya and other schools, may cause some issues with that. But generally, the prayer would be valid. But that's not how it's generally done. Okay. Right. Right. Right, so okay, what is the wearing football shirts with your team's emblem on it, including animal symbols? Animal symbols. Wearing pictures or stuff like this is permitted. Football, I'm not really I don't watch football at all, really, so I don't know much about the symbols involved in football. But the thing is, you can wear it. I don't feel if it's got some alcohol name on it, then generally I would say it's better not to wear it than to wear it, okay, because it's just unnecessary advertising for stuff like that. That's my understanding. Wallahu a'lam. Mufti the vampire slayer. Alright, Nathaniel. No, you don't. Arrogant people. Right, so we don't need to prove to anyone. Do you own a business? How do you... Yep, I'm involved in a few businesses, people. Entrepreneurship is the way forward, I'm telling you. It's the way forward, people. Keep an open mind. I don't mean by that attend these stupid seminars where you just pay people to tell you to. But just, you know, keep your mind open. Any businesses, online businesses, doing different things. Venture out a bit. Huh? Let the floodgates of rizq open up for you, inshallah. And I tell you, nothing is certain in this world. But if you're ever feeling scared about things like rizq, remember that Allah sustains the tiniest of microbes. And at the end of the day, we are still so beloved to Allah. Would He not sustain us? Of course He would, inshallah. You know, so Allah always have a positive mindset of Allah. Okay, so I would... You know, it's an amazing hadith that that is transmitted as a hadith Qudsi, that ana inda abdi ka dhannihi bi. I treat my slave as he expects me to treat him. So if you're somebody always in guilt, always like this, then that's how Allah's going to treat you, because you expected Him to treat you like that. And you see these happy-go-lucky people, right? And they always think good things are going to happen to them. And what do you know? Good things do happen to them. And that's because they expect Allah to treat them like that. And Allah treats them like that. So always think positive of Allah. You know, and I have to say this Junaid Jamshed incident, I was thinking about this and it really did get to me, as it did to many people. And it's not about, you know, some people say, oh, but many of the people died on the plane. And that's obvious, many, you know, but it's because you don't know the other people. It's just abstract kind of data. But because Junaid Jamshed was a household name, and I've personally met him. I'd sat down with him. He'd come to Birmingham. I'd spoken to him at a restaurant and stuff like this a few years back. But I mean, the point is, it's not even about having met him was the thing, but because he's a known name and you've heard him sing and you've heard him do things, and now somebody tells you about a tragic kind of... And look, I personally disagreed with several of his views. I agree that several of his views were seen as sometimes misogynistic and things like this. But the guy, you know, I commend his kind of... I wouldn't have done it in the same way, but I commend his sacrifices for what he thought was... I mean, he did it for the sake of Allah, or for Allah and Islam, in his understanding, which, you know, maybe if I was in his position, I would have definitely done things differently. But I feel he did whatever he did, and he gave up an amazing career. You have to remember, he was a person, his band, Vital Signs, emerged in Pakistan with the fall of martial law. So General Zia-ul-Haq, who was seen as extremely strict and rigid, you know, condemning people, and this kind of like iron fist approach, this kind of rose from the rubble of that, and it was a sign of rebellion and freedom, and it was a sign of regaining that spirit. And you know, they came out with their leather jackets and their stonewashed jeans and he was a good-looking guy, and he was out there, and he had many fans. I mean, I as a kid I'd heard of him, but I wasn't like such a fan or anything. Obviously, I heard of his Dil Dil Pakistan and a few other songs, but the point is, this guy had a lot going for him, and in his own way he sacrificed it for what he believed in, and that was an amazing cause. I mean, that sacrifice is huge. So, and he's died in a tragedy, so it becomes very like shocking to people. And I was kind of shocked at the hatred that kind of poured out from some people towards him upon his death, and saying, look, that, oh my God, that this guy, this apostate has died, and so on, and blah, and swearing at him and abusing him, and it just once again disappointed me with the state of the Muslim community. Just to think that, well, just as you think, maybe we're emerging from this backwardness, this medievalist mentality, we're not. And even some of the feminists really went for him on Twitter, and I just felt that, look, and I responded to some of them by saying, look, I personally disagree with these things, but the thing is, the guy, there's a time and place for everything, and this is not the time nor place. The guy just died in a tragedy, for God's sake. Where is your humanity? He's a human being at the end of the day. I mean, I personally disagree with, but this is not the place for it. But anyway, I was thinking about the incident. Now, I was just thinking, damn, like, imagine being in a position like that you know that you only have, like, maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes. And there is a sense of hope, but there's this overwhelming kind of like, uh-oh, what would you do? And it's a daunting, incredibly daunting thought. And I would say that, look, Allahu A'lam, I mean, we're not in that position, and we can only speculate, and it's a very terrifying and daunting position. But in some way, like, you think to yourself that, look, no matter what your position, or your situation, think good of Allah. Okay. That He has showered you with unlimited, unrestrained and unrestricted gifts and blessings in this dunya. And what's to come is more awesome. That you are going to a much greater place than this. Okay. And to kind of think of all the amazing things that could lie in wait for you. So, and with that thought, I think you'd say your shahada. I mean, the thing is, one thing for sure is that, look, everybody's time in this dunya is finite. Yeah, and we all got to go at some point. And in some way, rather than a long, agitated kind of thing, I mean, although the shock of a surprise, but you think, my point of mentioning this was that coming back to always to have a good state of mind about Allah, especially in tragic situations. And to just kind of, I suppose, if you can't do anything about it, then just embrace it and just, think good of Allah. And I know that's very easy to say and very difficult to practice. With that, I ask, may Allah protect us all from any kind of, let alone tragedy, of any kind of discomfort in this dunya. May He shower us with just comfort and ease and give us the best of both worlds. And may He replace the suffering and grief of any worldwide with infinite and abundant joy. Inshallah, with that, people, I'm going to leave you for tonight's show, inshallah. Till next week, remember me in your du'as. Take good care of yourselves. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.